In a world filled with adventures, there were people suffering, including a kid with a chaotic family. However, since the flow changed after Reborn got reincarnated, he was determined to change his future. Before he became this little boy, he was Kanda. He was an adult working at a company. His co-worker suggested playing an anime game days earlier, and Kanda had fun. He didn't expect it to make him hooked, so his co-worker was glad he liked it. He stayed up all night to finish that game. This adult man was Kamda Hajime, a 33-year-old with a satisfying salary. He gets to play games after work, and without realizing it, his health deteriorates for endless nights of staying up late. His body reached his limits, and he was tucked in on a fluffy bed when he opened his eyes. He wondered where he was because the ceiling was unfamiliar. He panicked when he saw his legs all thin and tiny, and after seeing his reflection in the mirror, he screamed in fear. A maid rushed in worriedly, and when she realized Rid was awake, she called everyone. Kanda was so confused by the unfamiliar faces. The butler said he collapsed in the garden, which made them worried. When he introduced himself as Garn, he smiled and apologized for making them worry. The maids gasped, making him wonder if he had said something wrong. Garn lowered his head and said his words were too humble for them. He was told to ring the bell on the side if he needed anything else, and when they got out, he groaned from the pain inside his head. The unknown memories from someone else were rushing through his head. After seeing the memories, he realized he was inside Rid's body. A boy from the anime game, Tokirella, was among the villain's followers. He looked outside and confirmed that he was reborn as a minor villainous character. He rang the bell quickly to check his current situation. The maid went inside and asked if he needed anything. He told her not to worry and murmured he was supposed to be 7 this year, but the maid said he only turned 6 last month. He nodded and tried acting normal as he asked about their family. He learned that his family, the Baldia family, were neutral nobles. He also learned the names of his family and that his father occasionally works in the imperial capital's administration. She wondered why he kept asking these weird things, so Rid told her not to worry and thanked her. Due to his charming smile, the maid flinched nervously. Rid sighed because this maid was scared of him. Then, a memory of hurting the maid flashed before him, and he realized the previous Rid was harsh and mistreated everyone. He asked her name, so when she said it was Danai, he smiled and said he would look forward to getting along with her. The maid's heart fluttered and they muttered kawaii unconsciously. She excused herself out of the room. The next morning, Danai woke him up, and when he opened his eyes, his cheeks turned red. The maid panicked, but he couldn't say he was in awe of her maid outfit. When he changed his clothes, he went to the dining hall, and delicious foods were served at his long, empty table. He felt lonely and asked where everyone else was. So Garn said Rainer, his father was at the Imperial, and his mother wasn't feeling well. After eating, he thought of visiting his mother, Nunali Baldia. He was curious about her because the game didn't mention her name. When they arrived at the door, Danai noticed he looked tense but said he was fine, and felt he hadn't seen his mother in a long time. Rid could feel like his body was telling him not to enter. He caught it off and knocked on the door. When he went inside, a beautiful woman greeted him with her warm smile. His eyes widened in shock, and a flood of emotions rushed to him in a blink. His eyes began to weep. When his mother started coughing, he rushed to her worriedly. Nunnally asked if he was alright after collapsing in the garden. Rid shook his head as he apologized for making them all worry and assured them he was okay because he was their strong son. Nunnally chuckled, and after a few minutes, he bid goodbye and went to Garn quickly. The butler knew the young master would ask about his mother's illness and said he couldn't tell him. Rid told him he was serious and wouldn't give up until he said it. Garn sighed and told him that his mother suffers from mana deficiency syndrome. Manas should regenerate over time normally, but with this syndrome, their ability to recover diminishes drastically and leads to death. He heard about this when he was still playing, so he decided to study the disease. The library door creaked open and a little girl peeked through the crack. He figured it was his sister's Melody. She asked what he was doing, so he said he was looking something up and asked her to come with him, but she anxiously asked if he wouldn't get mad if she stayed. When he said he would read her a picture book, Melody excitedly rushed to him. He asked her to close the door, so she quickly did it and headed to his side to listen to the story about a princess. During this time, Rid's memories were returning, and he learned that when Melody came into the world, Rid was so happy. Still, the moment Nunnally fell ill, his restless anxiety spread, and some of that anger was directed at Melody. Their distance grew, and they couldn't even share meals anymore, so he apologized to her out of the blue. She replied saying, "What for? Ah, brother, you shouldn't sleep in the garden." Rid told her not to copy what he did, so she nodded, making him say Melody was smart. She suddenly told him to just call her Mel because their mama always calls her that way, and her brother could call her Mel because he is special. Eventually, Mel fell asleep, so he rang the bell carefully. When Danai saw the calming, sleeping face of the little girl, she smiled. She carried Melody, and when Garn went inside, he was surprised when Rid said he read her some books until she fell asleep. Garn was relieved and commended him. Rid giggled, stating Mel was his little sister, making Garn say he seemed like a different person now. His heart pounded in nervousness while he said he didn't change that much. It wasn't surprising for the staff to notice the changes since they had seen the previous Rid. After what happened earlier, he remembered he was condemned, judged, and exiled for being the villainous accomplice, so he wanted to avoid that at all costs. He wrote that he should befriend the main characters to avoid getting caught up in the villain's plan. Since he was in the Marquis' territory, it would be hard to interact with them, so he had to hone his skills to survive on his own and earn more money. He remembered the gush of emotions Rid had when he saw Nunnally. He knew this little kid had been suffering by watching his beloved mother gradually weaken. He must find a way to avoid condemnation and live an honest lifestyle because he knew, as Kamda, what it felt like to see his mother suffer helplessly and send her off to heaven. He didn't want that to happen again, so he must save Nunnally by gathering information on possible treatments. Ever since he was reincarnated as Rid Baldia, who has beautiful silver hair and purple eyes, he could memorize every book he read, word for word. He had been spending his time reading books, and among the plants, gems, and ores, many shared the same names and appearances as those in his previous life. It was familiar to him. Garn Barn will inform him that Rainer, his father, has arrived. He would finally meet his father that day, so he hoped things would go well. When he got inside, he excused himself, and Rainer's piercing stare made him uncomfortable. His father asked how he was feeling, and he said he was all right now. Rainer nodded and asked what he wanted to talk about, so Rid said he wanted to learn magic and martial arts and pursue his studies. He knew this character would be useful if trained, but it would take effort to train him. It is good that Kamda is up to this challenge. Since his collapse, Rainer planned to postpone those due to his mental state, but he said that moping for his mother's state wouldn't change anything, so he wanted to be strong enough to help her. Rainer smirked and gave Garn a signal to call for tutors. Rid asked for funds to be used at his discretion for his second request. His father frowned and asked what he would do, so he explained he had many ideas for potential products, basically asking his father to invest without even preparing a proposal. He knew this was a gamble, but he believed showing enthusiasm could move people, plus he is his child. As expected, Rainer gave in. Rid thanked him, but the dude wasn't done asking for a favor. He asked him to start eating together because Mel and he hadn't spoken to Rainer much. Rainer was surprised Rid was calling Melody Mel. During their meal, his children were eating side by side. Rainer couldn't help but ask Melody if he could also call her Mel. However, Melody shrieked. There was a moment of silence as they waited for her response, and when she said he couldn't because only her brother and mother could call her that, Rainer's aura changed in a switch. Rid would inspect the territory after their meal, so two knights named Diana and Rubens would escort him in the carriage. The Baldia territory was far from the capital, and there was a lot of land for cultivation, so farming and trade flourished there. Diana informed him they would be arriving soon. Rid didn't come to sightsee because he planned to act on his words earlier. When they arrived at the largest city in the territory, many people were there, so the knights reminded him to stay in their sight. He smiled and nodded at them. Rid stopped in front of the Christie Company and went inside. A woman with cat ears welcomed them and asked what they were looking for. Rid said he had sent Christie a letter before. She gasped upon realizing who he was, so she called her master. When Christie Saffron came, she greeted them. She is the only elf in the Baldia territory. They went to a private room to talk formally and privately. He even asked his knights to stay outside to keep their conversation as secret as possible. He discussed what he came for, the production of skin lotion and hair conditioner. A few days before this, he learned from the books that this world had aloe, but when he blurted out skin lotion, Danai asked what it was. He tried explaining cosmetics, but she had no clue about skincare. She seemed fascinated by the idea and asked how he came up with it. He panicked and said he thought of it because aloe was growing around their mansion. That was when he thought of making this new product in their olive-rich area to create luxury products to trade with nobles. He created an aloe skin lotion and olive conditioner prototype. He asked Christie if she heard of any similar product about it. She shrugged her shoulders and said it would only be an idea without the products, so he excitedly took the prototypes he made. She was surprised and inspected it. She tried smelling it and tried it on her hands. When it dried, she was amazed by the result of her skin, but her excitement broke her front demure character. She cleared her throat and said she was only delighted to know there was a solution to her dry skin, and she told him to commercialize this product. After their discussion, they moved to their future plans and asked her to search for 2 ingredients he needed to treat his mother. Christy was terrified by how bright the kid was because she went far away from her family for her business, yet it looked like she was made to babysit this kid. After their talk, the knights were curious about their conversation, so he told them Christy accepted his proposal. Rid had no time to celebrate because he needed to work harder now. As they were walking, his eyes were caught by the young lady passing by. She looked lost and confused, so he called her to ask if she was all right. She jolted in shock. She didn't know what to say, so he apologized for startling her. He told her he was from the Marquis family and asked if she needed help. The girl said she got separated from the person she came with, so he volunteered to guide her back to where they separated. As they got there, a woman spotted her and thanked them for helping her get back to her. Rid smiled and said it was natural to help someone in trouble. His words moved the girl, and somehow the knights noticed her red cheeks. The woman and the girl went to their inn. She was relieved the princess was unharmed, but noticed how flustered she was as she wondered what that boy's name was. The woman even commented that she looked in love. Speaking of the boy, Rubens wondered why Rid didn't ask the girl's name. They chuckled softly when he heard no reply as they noticed he was asleep. When they got back, Rid woke up and was introduced to his magic tutor named Sandra. The two greeted each other, and he was so excited about their lesson. They jumped straight to study, and since Rid never used magic before, Sandra explained they must refine his life force to convert it to mana. In short, Rid needs to start with making mana out of his life force. It was no easy feat, but Sandra was willing to guide him step by step. Upon seeing her dedicated look, he thought she must really love magic. The two went to the training grounds to show him some examples of actual magic. When they got there, she lifted her hand, concentrated her mana on her palm, and released the sphere of flames. The powerful fireball blasted, making his eyes sparkle in amazement. He rushed to her and said his teacher's spell was so cool. She was caught off guard because hearing someone call her that way made her heart flutter. She cleared her throat and told him he could do it as well by picturing it perfectly. They proceeded to manifest mana on Rid. However, after a few minutes, he still didn't understand it. Sandra asked him if he wanted to try the other method. He agreed despite feeling bad about it. When he gave his hands to her, she smiled and blasted his core with an electric current. Rid screamed and shakingly told her his body felt like shattering, but she said it was normal to feel something inside him being drawn out through his palms. The current continued, and he bared the pain as he wondered why his teacher's spell looked like she was enjoying it. When it was finally over, Rid slammed to the ground, huffing for air after the torture. Sandra chuckled as she apologized because she had no choice but to do it for him forcefully. He gritted his teeth because this sadist teacher didn't even warn him. She asked him to try converting mana again, but he could feel the mana inside him this time. He was told to compress the source until it converted to mana, and after a few seconds, he felt the surge of mana inside him. They proceeded to try to make a fireball. He was told to picture it inside his head, and when he managed to summon fireball, he released it to the stand. Sandra was shocked to see it. Rid jumped from happiness but noticed Sandra, speechless and staring blankly. She explained that she didn't expect someone to learn mana and cast a spell on the first day. She smiled and said she had a genius student like him. After successfully casting fireballs a few times, he tried releasing them without chanting, and as expected, he did it. He was getting to know about mana, so they went to the library to study the mana amount someone would have. He asked if there was a way to recover his mana quickly, but just like every country, they were still figuring out how. Sandra continued explaining the attribute magic and special magic that could convert mana into elements. He was excited to learn and try these elements out someday. After a long day, it was the next day, and it was time for him to head to the grounds. Rid was doing his warm-ups, making Rubens confused about what he was doing, so he said he was warming up. The knight nodded and said he usually does running first. He would be teaching Rid martial arts. He was nervous because he wasn't confident about the strength and skills he had in his previous life. Rubens asked him to try swinging his wooden sword, and he was surprised when the knight said he had a knack for it. To assess Rid's skills, Rubens asked him to try attacking him, so he rushed to him in a straight line and swung his sword at him. Sometimes he loses balance, but he continues getting up to fight. Rid was somehow surprised how easily he was getting a hang of it. His body was light as he moved, and he didn't expect swinging his sword to be this fun. He was relieved Rid's physical capabilities were quite high. After more hours of training, Rubens commended him and said he could even surpass his father. Despite the comment, Rid was frustrated because he didn't land a single hit on him. He was thinking of a way of getting back at him, so he figured to use Diana, his childhood friend. He moved closer and asked if he liked her. Rubens' cheeks flushed, and he wondered why he asked. Rid snickered and said everyone had been saying he was too cowardly to confess because their relationship hadn't gotten anywhere. Rubens was stabbed in the heart by his comment. He was speechless and curled on the floor in despair. He noticed Diana walking by, so he called her. She turned and noticed her friend sulking on the floor, so she told her young master that Rubens was too fragile and could easily end up this way. She got curious about what Rid said to make him like this. He looked away and shyly said he told Rubens he was too cowardly when it came to her. Chills went down his spine when he felt the oozing dark aura behind her. She told him they should have a nice long talk later. She smacked Rubens' head to wake him, making him gasp and wonder why she was there. Once their training was done, Diana looked at Rid, smiled, and said they should talk. With that, Diana climbed to the top of Rid's list of people not to mess with and learned that he shouldn't mess with other people's love affairs. A day came when Rid read a book to his sister inside their mother's room. He made sounds and expressed emotions through his storytelling that the two commended. Rid was glad to see his sister enjoying his different voices. Before this, he felt threatened because when he read it in a neutral tone, her stare pierced him. Nunnally commended Rid's talent, but Melody said she should praise her too. Their mother chuckled and patted her head. Rid could see through her smile how she must have been suffering, so he had to stop there to give her some rest. He went to the receiving area to meet Christy. He was informed that the commercialization was promising. The two of them discussed the product multiple times, resulting in smooth product progress. He was surprised how capable she was, but Chris clarified she couldn't have done it without his funding. To ramp up the production, they had to let people know about common healthcare knowledge and how to utilize their products between species or skin types. They also had to take into mind the countermeasures for imitations. He plans to teach them how to use it and return the product if it doesn't work on them. He would use their family's crest as their logo and use Christie's and Saffron's company for storage management. He even asked Christy to be the face of their product, which shocked her. Rid nodded and said she would be perfect for it. A few days before this, his father suggested he present some to the imperial couple, but Rid said the Christie company would go to the capital with Rainer because if they saw how young he was, they might doubt him. With Christie's beauty, and if she became more beautiful after using the products, many men would want to gift these products to their loved ones. His father started to think about how a 6-year-old was thinking like this. Christie accepted the role and took something out of her bag. She showed him the moonlight grass, a medicinal plant he asked her to find. Looking at it, he couldn't help but cry as he thought of his mother. He bowed his head to thank her. Christie said she hadn't found the root grass, and several days later, she and Rainer went to the capital to present the products. While they were at it, Rid moved on to his next product. He was planning the mana potion made from the moonlight grass, but there was a problem. He doesn't know anything about pharmacology, and Garn advises him to ask Sandra about it. He rushed to his teacher to ask about the medicinal herb. She was fascinated by the glowing plant on his hand, and when he explained it would be used to restore mana, she gasped as she realized it was a moonlight grass. She couldn't believe it existed because she had been looking for it in her laboratory in the capital. Rid was glad the two of them were trying to make mana potions. Elite mages like her shared the same goal. With her knowledge and research, she became the director of a lab. The goods she had been expecting to be delivered for her experiments were getting delayed, so she had to change the formula. She was too preoccupied with making her ideas come true, but many nobles had come to despise Sandra because they didn't like how she spent a lot of money to hire people without considering their status. Due to a lack of positive results in their research, people started quitting. She resigned from the lab, and her family even disowned her. She had nobody at her lowest point, but when Marquis Rainer had taken her in as a tutor, she felt needed. She couldn't help but cry in his arms. Now this student of hers was asking for her help in making the potion that once ruined her life. When Rid said he wanted to do this to buy his mother some time, her heart softened. She remembered his father's kindness, and she didn't hesitate to accept him. Sandra said she would do her best to help him. She was fired up because he even promised her a research lab for their work. She took the herb and told Rid to call her by her name instead in times like this. She giggled as she reminded him to call her teacher during their lesson. He chuckled at her and suddenly thought about how his father and Chris were doing in the capital. Speaking of them, Christy was sweating in nervousness because one noblewoman asked her to sell the production method and rights to the Magnolia Empire instead. Before that happened, when they were entering the capital, Rainer asked if they were ready. Chris was excited to present the products to the royalties, but he suddenly looked away and told them not to let their guard down because this place was a fearsome place, and they were nothing but pawns to them. The capital was filled with its own beauty, and they could never get used to the overwhelming sight of the fortress city. 2 5-meter walls encircled this empire. Those who lived near the castle were nobles, and the common town lay beyond their walls. When Rainer left for a second, Christy got nervous because the soldiers were taking too long to inspect their carriage. The soldiers said they had to make a thorough inspection, but luckily, Rainer came to stop them. When he said that they were with him, the soldier jolted and left them alone. It was a relief they passed through their unnecessary inspections, so Rainer told them those soldiers were under Count Roland. He apologized for what happened, and suddenly, a voice greeted Marquis Rainer. He smiled with his barely clasping buttons to welcome them, but when he saw the woman beside her, he asked who she was. When Christy introduced herself, Roland smirked and said he heard about how she left her family, the Saffrons. His voice was filled with mockery, as he said it might only be some baseless rumors. He noticed the beast woman with her and commented that the beast does tend to stick together. Christy was insulted, but she knew he was saying this to tick her off. She couldn't bear hearing someone insult Emma, but before she could talk, Rainer told the pig his jest had gone too far. He added that they came there for an audience with the Imperial Majesties. Roland apologized sarcastically and left. When Rainer got inside a room, he couldn't help but call Roland a pig who loved authority and money. Emma was teary-eyed as she apologized for causing trouble, but Chris hugged her and reminded her she did nothing wrong. A maid came inside to escort them to the Majesties, and it was finally time. The audience hall was filled with nobles. The Emperor, Arweem Magnolia, and Empress Consort, Matilda Magnolia, apologized for making the wait. Rainer greeted them, and the Emperor asked who he was with. Christy kept her head low and said she was the daughter of Baron Saffron of Astoria Kingdom. Arwen was surprised to hear she came from a powerful family. When Christy responded that her father only recently granted his title, Roland gulped because he knew he messed up a big poop inside his pants in shock. He thought Christy was just a merchant's daughter. The Empress spoke and said she would like to see what they had already, so Christy took 2 bottles out. The men inside the hall were uninterested, but the Empress and other women inside the room were interested. Chris said it was a skin lotion and conditioner she uses. Matilda asked permission to touch her hair, and when she felt it, the Empress was amazed by its texture. She had never seen such smooth and silky hair before, and added that only a woman would understand its worth. Christy told her to try the skin lotion, but Roland blurted out that it was dangerous. Matilda turned to him with glaring eyes and asked if she inquired for his opinion. The Count gulped, speechless. The Empress poured some to her skin and asked if she intended to win every woman in the castle. When the lotion set, she was amazed by the softness it did to her skin. She commended it and suddenly asked if she would consider selling the recipe and production rights to their empire. Christy didn't expect that to come from the Empress. She went silent for seconds and said she could adhere to that request because Marquise Rainer was also involved in the development. Matilda told her it was not a problem because Rainer was a subject of their empire, so he couldn't refuse that. Christy looked at Rainer to ask for help, but he avoided her gaze. She was all on her own now. She elaborated that their company invested everything into these products, and if the Empress abused her authority to steal it from them, they will leave the country. She offered to give the Empress the right of first access to ensure she would never run out of supply. She was humbly asking for leniency, so Matilda agreed to her proposal. The nobles gasped in shock, but the Empress said if they robbed the people's creation, merchants would turn away from the capital and their empire would decline. The Emperor agreed with her and said they should be more prudent with rights and announced these products would belong to Christie companies in the Baldia territory. For some reason, Christie was surprised that things went smoothly after that. When she spotted the Empress wink at them, she looked at Rainer and realized everything that happened was planned from the start. Matilda actually never wanted the rights to the product because she only wanted to secure their products for personal use. She could have ordered them directly, but would be abusing her authority. She didn't expect she had been playing right into their hands. When she got back to the room, she sighed from exhaustion. Rainer commended her, and the Imperial Majesties had arrived when he was about to speak. They stood up in surprise, but the couple apologized for intruding abruptly. They all sat on the couch to talk. Arwen apologized to Christie for involving her in their schemes. Rumors about the product from the moment Rainer brought a prototype spread like wildfire, so they brought up the matter of exclusive rights to keep the nobles in check. Since Chris had the production rights, nobles wouldn't mess with her. The Emperor and Rainer stood up and excused themselves for their private discussion. Matilda's maid placed a piece of paper on the table, and she jumped straight to the first delivery right. While Matilda drained Christie's social battery, the Emperor informed Rainer a certain country wanted to marry into their imperial family, or an equivalent noble. However, Rainer's son was the only one without fiancé, so Rid was their only choice. Speaking of Rid, he was sleeping after a tiring day without knowing what was about to happen. He dreamt about the day Rid caught a beautiful butterfly and showed it to his mom. Nunnally said it was beautiful and he should let it go. He was confused, so she explained that butterflies live like humans, are weak, and could perish. She added that life means you can move and talk, but when you lose your life, it could disappear forever. She flinched when she noticed him crying as he asked if she could also perish. She chuckled as she nodded but promised to always be with him. Before he got to this body, he was also a boy who liked catching insects. While he was feeling nostalgic, Mel came crashing on his back to show him the little bird she had caught in the garden earlier. He smiled as he found the bird cute and fluffy, but when Mel asked if she could keep it, he realized she looked much like Rid and her mother. He crouched as he said the cute little bird's parents might be looking for him. Just like them, birds do everything to stay alive. Mel understood his point and asked what the word alive meant, so he passed on words he learned from Nunnally. Every day passing felt like something was leaking out of Nunnally like a broken glass. Her disease crept in without any signs until she could no longer stand up on her own. If she tried to concentrate, the sense of losing something seemed to fade a little. When everyone learned about her impending death, everything turned worse. But suddenly her son changed. He was now calmer and noticed Mel smiling very often nowadays. The changes in Rid's heart began guiding their family in a better direction, giving her hope and will to fight this disease. Rid was currently resting under the pleasant weather, but when he remembered his father and Chris were working hard, he felt guilty for slacking off, so he decided to try using his attributes as he remembered in the game. He had been motivated to live after his plans rolled smoothly. His element attributes were also going well, as expected. He continued practicing in the woods and tried different spells he could remember and imagine. He even prepared a skill for a sudden attack called a flame spear, whose speed was almost invisible to the naked eye. When he was done, a rustling sound from behind was heard. Mel came out, commending her brother. He was surprised to hear that she had been watching him from the first spell he did. He walked to her and whispered that they should keep what she saw as a secret in exchange for reading her a picture book. Luckily, he convinced her and retained his low profile. He also received a letter from Christy saying his father set her up, that she banned Roland from her company, and that the Empress was crazy, which made him wonder what happened there. It was time for his magic lesson with Sandra. She talked about attributes. She asked if a special aptitude was needed to cast special magic, and when he said he didn't know, she said it was important to admit if he didn't know something. Rid asked if anyone could produce special magic with enough practice. She agreed, saying it would be possible if only one could have a clearer image and more mana to do it. One should have a substantial amount of mana in a magic that was inherited. In short, creating and inheriting special magic takes a lot of mana. She suddenly mentioned that she had found a mana restorative property on the moonlight grass. She was too focused on how to administer it, so she was excited to head home to start working on some prototypes. She suddenly stormed out of the room, making Rid ask about their lesson, so Sandra told him to self-study. Since he didn't have much to do, he walked around, wondering how he could know how much mana he had. As he wondered about measuring, it started raining. The weather became bad in a blink, so he ran quickly back to the mansion. When the maids saw him drenched, they quickly moved to bring him a towel and take him to a bath. They panicked, traumatized that he might collapse again. The maids dragged him to the room, and he was glad to have experienced this luxury bath. He felt it had been ages since he had such good baths, because the people in this world usually just wipe themselves. But since he's rich, the maid would bring the tub to his room. He suddenly wondered how much hot water they put there, making him realize the units of this world were the same as in his previous life. After bathing, he rushed to Garn to discuss things, so he headed outside and placed the big cup on the tree stump. He tried to fill it with water using his magic and tossed it away once full. He repeated the process, and he did it for the next 300 more times until he felt like he was almost out of mana. He kept focusing until he reached the 900th cups and felt the sensation of losing mana. He gained a spell called Mana Measurement that displays one's mana level. He tried activating it, and when he looked up, he saw his mana level at 80. When he activated the Mana Measurement again, it consumed another 20 to his mana. With that, he was certain this would be useful to Nunnally. It was already night when he returned to the house. The next day, in his class with Sandra, he told her about the mana measurement he created. Her voice became serious, and she said his way of thinking was so far from common sense. Rid explained the details of how he thought of it, making her wonder when he started using water magic. He was confused about why she wasn't excited about it, so when Sandra told him not to speak about that spell because he might get forced to work in the capital, he became curious. She realized he really doesn't understand how things work for ordinary people. She explained only a few could use magic, and someone who had refined control like him was a genius or hard-working. In this world, magic wasn't something essential for daily living. He didn't know magic would be this rare after coming to a fantasy world. Sandra wanted to tell him he was a mold-breaking child prodigy. When he asked why she wasn't forced to work in the capital, he felt a shiver as he saw her aura change. Sandra leaned closer to whisper that she was chosen as a lab director in the capital. She stepped back, giggling as she proudly said she was ousted due to jealousy of someone as a genius as her. He suddenly realized this weirdo already knew he could do something unthinkable, making him her research subject. She was dedicated to breaking every rule of common sense with this genius. Afterward, they kept working on the mana restoration properties on the grass. Sandra showed him the test products she had created. He was told to eat the raw, boiled, dried moonlight grass. He became the guinea pig for this experiment, all for the sake of his mother. After testing it, he learned eating it raw could recover 20 manas, but it was too bitter. Eating it boiled could recover 10 to 30 mana, but tasted like the food you cook, the worst one. The dried powder was the easiest to swallow and had 50 mana recovery, but Sandra wasn't done. She wanted to test different ways he could take it. They figured the powder form would be safe for his mother. He had finally completed the first step, but his teacher looked like she was having fun while he suffered from the unpleasant taste testing. He told her he would never forget her for making her subject, but she smirked because she would not tell him something important. He was curious, but he got a bad feeling about it. After that, he walked back to his room, but he came across Melody in the hall. The two greeted each other with a smile, but Mel suddenly froze. He gets confused as to why she stopped, but he only realizes why when Mel exclaims that he stinks so badly. She hid behind the maid, saying the brother she knew didn't smell. He looked around and noticed everyone was staying clear of him. Garn apologized as he covered his nose and politely asked him to wash himself. He awkwardly went to the room to clean, screaming his teacher's name in frustration. The next morning, he could hear the knights doing the radio calisthenics he taught Rubens. That knight had an incredible potential, as his reflexes were on par with Rid's. He was aware of it, and Rubens figured out the importance of warming up before training. Rid still couldn't land a hit on the knight, but Rubens told him he would have his first dungeon training on time. Rid got excited as Rubens explained that it was a place where you could gather materials, train, or fight hidden bosses. Dungeons are created when a core absorbs a huge amount of mana over time that would make an entrance to the outside world. If a dungeon was left alone, monsters would get stronger and could roam outside. It was the knight's duty to patrol and destroy the core. It sounds like an ant's house, where their queen lies in the deepest part. Rid asked about adventurers, so Rubens said they could be a part of a public or private guild where they accept quests. The harder the quest, the higher the reward they get. Since the knights deal with dungeons, adventurers mostly do gathering quests. Hearing it made him want to register one day, so Rubens promised to ensure he would have top-notch sword skills. He smirked and jokingly said to make sure to marry Diana before that happens. Rubens gasped, flustered, and asked him not to talk about it, but Rid kept telling him she liked him. One day, when she came to wake Rubens again, she told him she wouldn't always be around to wake him up because she would get married someday. Whenever she makes him lunch, she says she was only practicing when she got married, and when her parents asked them to get married, she said they were only friends. Rid couldn't even speak because Diana was obviously waiting for him to find courage. Rid asked if they had a special place, so he told him the place where he promised Diana to protect her. He told Rubens to go there and confess, but he couldn't believe a child was telling him this. Rid told him he was spineless and should think about how she would feel. Rid was glad he looked like he now had an idea. When they parted ways, he kept thinking about their situation. He was chuckling as they ate lunch, making Mel curious. Meanwhile, Rubens met with Diana at the place they used to play around. Rubens was all red as he spoke his heart out. According to what the rumors say, the two finally started dating. They just needed a little push, and things unfolded beautifully. Oh wow, a childhood friend and co-worker who still meets you daily. I hope they're happy together, and I'm not jealous at all. Anyways, a few days passed by, and Melody would always startle him by waking him up every morning while he was sleeping. He tried waking up before she could come, but she started sulking. Mel was busier now because of her studies, manners, language, and dancing lessons, so he realized waking him up like this made her feel still connected to her brother. He eventually accepted her body slam every morning, and one day, when Rainer returned with Christy, she looked like she went to war. She was exhausted from all the business talking with Matilda, leaving her no rest. Chris was escorted to a room, so Rainer called Rid to talk. Rid was confused about why his father was staring at him when they got inside. Rainer finally spoke and asked how he changed so much. He couldn't understand how his 6-year-old son could be calm in pressuring situations, and even coming up with the beauty products was mind-blowing to him. Rid was cornered. He knew tricking someone like his father would be hard, so he told him the truth. He said that the memories of Rid and his previous life were mixed, but his personality was based on his old life. He told Rainer he felt guilty for all the things Rid did wrong in the past, so he wanted to make Rid stronger. He mentions how deep in despair he was at being powerless to see his mother dying, so he promised Rainer he would do his best to protect their family. There was a moment of silence after the reevaluation. Rainer pressed his lips tightly and called his son Rid. He suddenly bowed his head and apologized, shocking him. He added that he had no idea how much he suffered and ignored his feelings. He admitted he failed as his father, leaving Rid teary because he was finally seen. Rainer seemed to believe what happened to him. He tried explaining that their world was imitated in his previous life. Since there are no game consoles in this world, he compared his experience in the game to a dream, and used the knowledge gained from that dream to create a medicine with a mana potion. Hearing it made Rainer spit his drink in shock, so Rid explained he and Sandra succeeded in producing it, and he even created a spell that measures mana. After the discussion of the medicine as a stopgap measure for Nunnally, Rainer called Garn inside. Rainer revealed that his marriage had been decided, making him gasp in shock. He couldn't believe he would be getting married in a few months at the earliest. During their trip to the capital, the Emperor told him that this marriage would cement their relations with the Renroot Kingdom. Garn said he would ensure the mansion would be in proper order when the princess moves in. Due to cultural differences, they might have to prepare a separate building for her. Rainer agreed to his idea, so Garn left to prepare it. Rid asked his father why a foreign princess would marry someone of his position. He told him that the Renorut kingdom was a country ruled by dark elves. The Bulst, ruled by humans, started hunting for elves to turn them into slaves, but Renorut couldn't afford to be sanctioned by the Bulst kingdom as they depended on their salt exports. Their kingdom went to Magnolia to ask for help, and in exchange for their full support, Renorut would become the vassal state of Magnolia. The enslaved elves were freed, so this marriage was under the pretense of strengthening relations. Since the Marquis was far removed from the central authority, Rid was chosen. He somehow felt bad for the princess for getting forced into marriage, and hearing those words made Rainer tell him to learn to love her enough to make up for it, because her happiness would now depend on him. Rid nodded and accepted his fate. He asked for her name, so Rainer said the first princess was Farah Renorute. He was curious about what she would be like. He volunteered to help construct the separate building and visit their kingdom. Their marriage hasn't been publicly announced yet, but they would be informing the Renoruts about Rid. As he left the room, he still couldn't believe he would get married at 6. Garn called him, assuring him that they would help him in making the princess happy. Rid smiled as he chuckled, saying they were the same age, and calling the princess madam would be too much. The following day, Rid went to see Chris. He tried knocking, but no one answered. He opened the door and went inside out of curiosity. Christy was sleeping on the bed, and he realized she must have been exhausted. He saw her beauty up close, but suddenly she groaned and was speaking about the Imperial Majesty. He went to the door because he thought he shouldn't be listening, but the doorknob wouldn't budge. When it creaked open, he was surprised, and saw Mel telling him this was no good. She told him entering a woman's room was inappropriate. Rid said he only checked on her and told her to open the door before she woke up. After a few minutes, Christy woke up. They discussed her exchange with Count Roland, the charades she went in, and the never-ending business talk with Matilda. The Emperor even told Roland to pay reparations for insulting Christy without knowing she was a foreign noble, but she rejected him, bringing Roland's shame over again. The Emperor heard about it and asked if she wished for anything else. Chris told every nobleman to stop believing in rumors because it could disgrace their empire. Arwen apologized to his uneducated subordinate. She resolved it by making it a problem for all the nobles, making Rid mumble that she was a true heroine. Chris was confident Roland wouldn't touch them because he got shut out of foreign companies, so dealing with him now would be better if they planned on expanding their business. Rid was just glad they became business partners. He added that her coming into their life was such a blessing. She also believed that she became lucky after encountering Rid because nobody had accepted her, and her endeavors never paid off. Roland even mocked her for starting her own company, but since she surpassed her older brother, people started questioning their family and asked why Chris wasn't the one to inherit the family business. As people started talking louder, Chris feared it could cause the company to split, so she went to a faraway place to start her own business. Although she had the talent, starting a company from scratch in a foreign land was difficult, but then this kid came into her life, turning the table around. Rid told her it was his butler who mentioned Christie's hard work she did in the Baldia territory and told her to be more confident in herself because she had made it this far. Chris was flustered by the praise she received. She couldn't help but shed tears because all of her hard work in the past was now paying off. They went to business talk, discussing that they must prioritize stocking the Empress up with 1 month's worth of goods before they sell products in the market. They would be paid in advance, but it worried Rid because they might now be able to produce much aloe since they only had begun its cultivation. She told him not to fret because, with her and Saffron Company, she secured contracts with farmers and adventurers to supply them aloe veras. Since she was the face of their product, Rid reminded her to secure enough product for herself after the Empress because barely anyone was as beautiful as her. Christie's face turned red. She looked away and told him to choose his words more carefully, but he was convinced he had made the right choice. He explained that their products would enhance her beauty even more, so everyone would adore her. They head on deciding the names of their product and ended up naming the lotion to Christie and the conditioner to Emma. He added that they could add ingredients or perfume to make new tons of products. Since Christie could directly negotiate with the Empress, she told him to contact her if he needed something to say to the Empress. He remembered how she whimpered nervously in her sleep as she called the Empress, so he said he preferred to stay away from someone who could make Chris whimper in her sleep. Everything went silent afterward. She asked how he knew about it, and he tried saying he saw her, but cut himself off after realizing it. Chris burst, calling him a scum for sneaking a peek at a woman while sleeping. Rid was terrified as he apologized to her. Right on time, the maid came for their tea. Mel was with her, so Rid asked for her help and asked her to say it was only a coincidence. However, Mel poured more gas into the fire by saying he was staring at Chris for ages. While that was happening, it was raining, and Nunnally's heart wouldn't stop hammering away as she felt that water drop dripping away from her. She cried as she huffed for air and said she would stand on her own feet again someday. "Sorry, Mom," MC will help you with that terminal illness once he is done with his rom-com shenanigans." She couldn't stop coughing out, but when she heard familiar voices near her room, she waited for them to enter. She was surprised to see them with an unfamiliar face. She apologized for her lack of decorum and introduced herself as the wife of Marquis Rainer, Nunnally Baldia. Her husband apologized for not being brave enough. He kept her disease a secret from her, so he told her that she was suffering from an incurable, fatal disease called mana deficiency. When Nunnally said she already knew, Rainer was shocked and asked who had told her, but she told him nobody had told her, and she only figured it out because she knew her body the best. Now that she finally knew the name of the disease, she easily accepted it. She called Rid because it had been the hardest on him and said she had failed to be his mother. But Rid exclaimed she didn't fail, and if anything, it was his father who failed his role. Rainer gasped in shock when his son repeated how he told him he failed as a father. The two quarreled a little until they reached how lonely and helpless Nunnally must have felt after Rainer averted his eyes and buried himself to work to escape reality. Those words woke him up. He knelt on the floor to apologize to his wife. But the painful memories vanished due to the love between them. Since their little lovely dovey was getting too long, Sandra spoke and told Nunnally to take the potion to lessen the symptoms. However, Nunnally started coughing, making Rid worried. She tried to say she was fine, but she screamed when a piercing pain stabbed her heart. Everyone panicked from her sudden deterioration. Rid activated his mana measurement skill, and his eyes widened as he saw the remaining mana. He told Sandra his mother only had 8 left. She took the medicine out of the box and handed it to Nunnally, but her body started acting up again before she could grab it. They couldn't get her to drink the medicine now. Rid cried to her, telling her not to give in. She looked at him, saying his name before she lost consciousness. Rid screamed and cried in despair, but suddenly they were surprised when his father jumped to the bed. He went over to his wife to give her a kiss. Tears went down his eyes as he remembered how he met her. He had been working as Arwen's aide, eager to climb ranks in the capital. He asked Arwen if the two of them really had to inspect in disguise. Arwen added that they would also be looking for a present for his wife. Rainer told him to send a subordinate instead, but Arwen wanted to be romantic. He revealed that his father was not getting any better, so the day would come soon when he would inherit the crown. So he wanted to make the most of his time and visit a town. But before that, he wanted to burn what it is he had to protect into his eyes. He was glad Rainer accompanied him, but suddenly heard some voice nearby. Rainer had to check it, so he told Dinas to keep Arwen safe. There was a group of men hiding in the street. A man who seemed to be respectable was holding a woman against her will. The woman exclaimed that she had already rejected someone arrogant and selfish like him. The grins on their faces made her heart pound in fear. The man said he liked the look on her face and said he would make sure she would feel the same way she embarrassed him. The woman cried helplessly, but luckily, Rainer arrived. When he asked what they were doing, the man told him she was her lover. A man was covering her mouth to keep her from talking. Rainer told her to tell the truth because he would do everything to save her if they were bothering her. The woman bit the man's salty hand and begged him to save her. Rainer smirked, and after a few moments the group of men twitched on the ground in pain. The man earlier, Logus Galliano, ran off and cursed them. Rainer asked the woman if she was hurt, but she cried as she thanked him for saving her. He patted her back to comfort her, but Dinas suddenly screamed his name worriedly. Rainer scolded him for shouting his name because they were undercover. While all that happens, the woman on the side seems taken aback. The name Rainer stuck in her mind, and a few months later, Rainer got a marriage proposal Matilda and his parents recommended. Arwen showed him the letter, and he sighed after Rainer scanned through it. His partner was the Crimson Lady, Nunnally Ronimus, who rejected all marriage proposals and was rumored to be quite a beauty. Rainer sighed, and on the day he finally met the woman engaged to him, he was surprised to realize she was the girl he had previously saved. He didn't realize how beautiful she was the first time they met, and said she gave justice to her nickname, Crimson Lady. She looked away and stuttered as she asked why. Rainer said her beautiful crimson hair made her an enchanting woman. She turned red as she explained that ever since she started rejecting marriage proposals and with her harsh criticisms, people started calling her that name. Rainer didn't expect such a story behind that, but Nunnally was glad he meant it in such a wonderful way. He was caught off guard by her charming smile and said he was quite smitten with her. He added that he would love it if she came to their territory as his wife. Nunnally accepted it and gladly married him. However, such a happy story might end with a tragedy. When Rid noticed his mother had swallowed the medicine, he used his mana measurement and prayed for it to work. When he opened his eyes, they were shocked to see her mana gone up. Rid was so happy when she told Sandra they had done it. They tried waking Nunnally up, and when she opened her eyes, she looked at them with a smile, telling them she felt fine now. Rid's tears poured. He cried like how an ordinary kid does. Well, there is no age for crying when your mom is about to die. After that, they ended up setting her on a dose of mana potion every morning, noon, and evening, while a permanent maid was stationed in her room to check her timely. When Rid said the mana potion spiked his mother's mana to 101, Sandra said it was Rainer who saved her. When he realized his wife could no longer take the medicine, he chewed the pills and mixed it with water in his mouth to deliver it mouth to mouth. Rid was amazed by his father's quick judgment. They went outside to give the couple some privacy. Meanwhile, in the Renaroot's kingdom, the Imperial Majesty was telling his subordinates that they should accept the visit request since they were the ones who requested a marriage to a nobleman of equal status. He told Norris they couldn't dismiss the Magnolia Empire's chosen partner. He sighed because it would be another matter if Marquise's son was troublesome. He asked Norris what he was scheming, so he proposed something to do with that kid. Typical sly knife ears. As these two were walking, Sandra couldn't believe a 6-year-old was speaking like an adult, making him gulp in nervousness. To divert her attention, he told her he wanted to discuss the new special magic he had come up with. He was talking about memory magic because he remembered reading a book that the brain never forgets, so he wondered if the brain was not only a part of the body, but of the soul as well. When they sat down, he asked if she knew a similar spell that could view a soul's memories. She mentioned the life magic god path, which means the life force was the source of mana, and he thought it appeared relevant to the matter at hand. Sandra said it is the closest thing to his soul, making him wonder what would happen if they tried the opposite of mana conversion. They head on to try it. He sat on the floor to concentrate, squeezing his life force to create mana and show the mana deep inside his body. At first, nothing seemed to happen, and as he continued, he noticed his mana was being sucked somewhere. He saw a hole nearby, and when he opened his eyes, he was in a different dimension. It was like a library with floating shelves. There was an empty chair before him. Other than that, it was all bookshelves. A voice greeted him nearby, and it was a copy of him. Rid was surprised and asked who he was. The copy said he is the personification of his memories. Rid told him he would like to remember some stuff more clearly, but he warned him because normal people aren't supposed to come there. The memory told Rid to use mana if he needed to call him, and told him that he might get there easily, but it would be dangerous for him to be there. The memory patted his shoulder, telling him to go and just call him if he needed something. When he left the dimension, Sandra's face was before his face. He jolted and screamed in shock. He looked around and wondered where he was now. Sandra told him she only checked on him because he scared her for being too quiet. Rid apologized for worrying her, but when she asked what happened, he looked away. He remembered how memory told him that place was dangerous, so he told her he failed. After a long day, he went to his room to rest and try calling memory. He was surprised to hear him greeting him, asking if he didn't believe he could do this. The memory asked what he wanted, but Rid told him he only tested this out. They bid goodbye, and he went to visit his mother the following day. Nunnally was feeling a lot better now with Sandra at the bedside. He sighed as he thought this sadist was playing innocent. Sandra glared at him because she figured he was thinking something rude. Rid was glad Sandra had been checking up on Nunnally. He wanted to perfect the cure quickly for his mother. Nunnally caressed his cheeks, asking why he looked so stiff. He said he was only thinking. When she brought up Rainer, who was calling for him, he went to his father. Rainer informed him that his scheduled visit to Renaroot had been decided. Rid was glad because he wanted to go there and find a cure for his mother's disease. Because they couldn't cultivate the moonlight grass, he wanted to see the advanced farming technology of the elves' country to secure a supply pipe with them. Rainer told him they shouldn't let their guard down because King Elias does try to stay on friendly terms, but some of his vassals don't agree to this marriage. He warned his son that they might try to make him back out of marriage. He wondered how he knew this, but Rainer smirked, realizing his father had a collaborator on Renaroot's side. Rainer nodded and told him he would teach him these things little by little to protect their territory. Meanwhile, at the king's palace, Norris was told that they would be going up against the Magnolia Empire and the Marquis, but this noble firmly stuck to his words. He still wanted the princess to marry the imperial family. The others agreed and buzzed like crazy. King Elias knew how Norris could be troublesome. He knew he planned to use the marriage to enter Magnolia's central politics, release them from a vassal status, and seize control over the empire from the inside. His son Rhasis came in. I know. The name could be ticking us off, but anyway, he came there to confront his father for handing over his little sister as a hostage to the empire. Elias sighed as he figured Norris had planted those ideas for him. Rhasis told him his sister was only 6 and asked why he had gone too far this time. The king told him he would be king one day and must learn to analyze situations like this. The prince gritted his teeth and lost control of his emotions, so the king asked him to cool off in his room. Rhasis sighed and apologized for speaking beyond his position before leaving. As he was walking, he came across Farah. His little sister greeted him. Rhasis asked that seeing her this far from her room was rare, so she said their mother called for her. He looked away and said he went to their father and got scolded. Farah got worried for him. She was as beautiful as their mother, Eltia. Farah received strict lessons, making her seem much more mature than her age. She was his pride and joy, and Racis wanted to protect her. Farah was told that her mother was waiting, so she excused herself. Racis had his resolve cleared. He would do whatever it takes to protect his little sister from anyone who could harm her. Memory had scolded Rid because he had been making him look up something from his memories in the past life. It was like a pay-per-minute phone call to Memory. He was asking about the game's main story, but all Memory saw was him skipping the important parts. He did remember an elf named Racis in the game, and he was pretty easy to train and use. The Memory could look up to what he saw, heard, and felt in his previous life. He saw many things from Rid's memory, and he was like reassembling a shredded paper. But Rid still asked him to do him a favor. His lesson with Rubens had been going despite his business with the mana potion. On this day, Ruben decided to finally teach him how to strengthen his body with mana, making him get up. He told him he would need to produce mana and grasp the feeling of moving his body while channeling mana through it. Rubens even said they had to feel it, not think. When he revealed that if one could master it, he would hardly ever run out of breath. Rid gasped as he realized Rubens had been using that technique the whole time, and that explains why he never got exhausted no matter how long their lesson went. He dropped to the floor, sulking in defeat. He swore to him that he would master it to defeat him. Ruben accepted his challenge and started their training by channeling his mana while running laps. Rid was getting the hang of it due to his magic training with Sandra. Rubens said after 10 years, he was certain he wouldn't even hold a candle against him. He was amazed by how he kept up with his lessons without body strengthening. Rid's days of sparring and training with him went on. He was persistent and eager to get stronger. Rid had been itching to land a hit on him despite knowing the experience, size, skills, and many more gaps between them. The more he loses against him, the more he wants to win. When his sword was flicked off his hand, he pushed himself forward to take advantage of his height and try to land a kick. However, Rubens caught him. He commended his fighting spirit even if he was unarmed. Rid frustratingly asked for another round, but Rubens said their lesson was done with him. He added that a special instructor came for him, and everything they did was just a warm-up. Rid went silent as he processed it. He gasped in shock because those intense fights were only warm-ups. A familiar voice approached, and it was his father. Rid looked at him confusedly. When Rainer asked him to come at him with all of his power, Rid shook in nervousness. Even if he was scared, he was curious about how his father fights, so he picked up his sword and dashed towards him with all his speed. Rainer smirked as he blocked his attack. As he said, his swordsmanship and body strengthening were incredible for his age. Rid stepped backward to breathe. Rainer teasingly asked if he was giving up, and when Rid said no, his father went to attack him this time. Rid groaned as he blocked his powerful blow. However, he easily got overpowered and unarmed in a blink. He was still ready to fight despite that, making Rainer say he passed the wooden sword test. He dropped to the ground, huffing for air. He didn't know when he felt this tired before, but he wasn't done. Rainer wanted to see his grit, which meant having a mental strength during life and death situation. He took a real sword out of the sheath, making his eyes widen in fear. Rid was told not to move and keep his eyes on him. He thought it would be easy, but when his father started, his aura changed, and he felt that shivering fear down his spine, which was a true killing intent from someone. He couldn't help but flinch and fell on the floor. He cried as he screamed, but when he opened his eyes, he was unscathed. Rainer said his braveness was expected for his age. He told him to keep his eyes on him no matter what. Rid apologized for losing to the fear of the sword and his intent to kill. Rainer told him he must overcome this fear. Without his grit, his fear would create an opening in him. Rid nodded and bravely accepted it. Ruben said his father's way of teaching was special and told Rid to do his best. Rainer prepared for the next blow and warned his son before swinging his sword at him. He felt like it could cause him the end, but even if his body told him to stop, he knew the need to do this. From every strike Rainer did, he kept trying to keep his eyes open. He was fighting himself, and when he finally witnessed the path of his father's sword, traces without flinching, Rainer stopped on time. After passing this test, he gave Rubens a sign to take his place as he drew a line between them. His father told Rid to cross this line to get to Rubens while he tried to stop him. The three prepared for the next set, and when it started, Rid sprinted towards his father. When Rainer tried punching him, he used their height difference to slip through it, but Rainer used his sword to stop him again. Rid was caught off guard by his speed, but luckily he was getting used to it now. He stepped back a little to start over, and Rid finally reunited with Rubens. He ran to hug him happily like he didn't piss and tease him that much. Rubens commended his hard work from Rainer's no-mercy training. The test was finished, but when Rainer said they would be doing this every time, Rid gasped. Rubens had to step in to interpret what he said. He told Rid his father only wanted to say he was happy to get to train him. Rid finally understood but was crying inside for his merciless training to come. Melody called him from afar. She ran to them worriedly. When she stopped and pouted her lips, she told his father she hated him for bullying her dear brother. Rainer choked in surprise. He didn't know what to say, so the maid apologized. Melody dragged his brother from the father, who almost got his title as a father ripped off from Mel. Rid told her their father only did that for his sake, but she stayed firm about hating Rainer. A few days later, Rainer had been sulking or getting hated by his own daughter, so he barely got out of his room. Mel finally came to him that day, and it surprised him when she apologized for what she said. Rainer couldn't help but shed tears of joy while Mel happily told the maid she finally did it. The day finally came for Rid's scheduled visit to the neighboring country. Mel hugged him, and her brother whispered something to her for their father. Mel walked to Rainer, called him, and hugged him tightly. Rainer froze in shock, and when she told him to come back soon, her cuteness pierced his heart. He lifted her and promised her he would return as quickly as he could. Sandra told Rid to leave Nunnally to her care and reminded him to be careful how he used his magic. They set off on their journey, rocked by the carriage to the Renna route. Two monsters would run into each other deep within the demon forest in the east. There was this slime who had been running around the forest because most of the monsters only saw him as their food. When a viper tried to sneak an attack after surviving a different snake, a black cat jumped in to scratch its face. The slime held onto a grass in fear as it watched the two hiss. Eventually, the snake lost to the cat with two tails. The slime was amazed by his strength, and when the cat noticed that there was a slime, he was confused as to why a low-ranking prey was in the mana-dense forest. Normally, slime splits into two after gathering mana, but there are some cases where slime doesn't split and just continues to absorb mana, and as a result, it develops emotion. Unfortunately for this one, it was fear. He got it from witnessing the monster's darkness for the past months. Thus, slime was constantly living in fear. When she even tried to hide, that was when the snake found her and met this black cat. The cat suddenly halted and asked the slime why it was following him. He looked behind and saw the slime twitching in fear, so he sighed and let it inside. The slime jumped from happiness. The cat thought he would only keep it for emergency food supply. The next morning, after hunting their food, he was shocked to see his nest spotless and sparkling. He realized the slime had eaten all the bones and leftovers. He tossed the meat to the slime and told it to eat, but warned him not to get the idea that he hunted the meat for her. Since the cat hated cleaning, he made a deal with the slime to keep their nest clean in exchange for staying with him. From that day on, they lived like that for a while, and although they couldn't communicate properly, they understood each other's intentions over time. One day, the cat heard a voice waking him up. He confusedly yawned and said he would hunt later, but when he realized it was the slime who talked, he jolted. He was confused as to why he could finally hear the slime, but it looked like the slime had been wanting to talk to him and caused the trigger for them to communicate. The slime even wondered if it would be possible to turn into his form. So the cat accepted the challenge and said he would even take her as his wife. The slime got excited and started praying for it every day. Rumors about their duo spread, and their usual location was known to many. One day, the slime showed something to him. The slime suddenly began liquefying in the air, making the cat nervous. It took a few seconds to untick the slime and turn it into a sparkling, pearly white cat. Her eyes were beautiful and captivating, leaving the black cat speechless. The slime asked how she looked, and he said she looked cute. She excitedly asked if he remembered his promise before. When he stuttered, she thought he had forgotten about it. He only stuttered because of their racial differences, but he had decided to ask the slime to be his mate, his wife, and stay with him forever. She asked him if he was sure and mentioned their differences, but he told her he would love her no matter her form. Love truly knows no bounds. The slime cried in happiness. She finally felt safe and secure. So the two formed an unusual couple and lived quietly in the demon forest. But things would change when they came across a child of a man who possessed a mysterious power. I don't care about the main story anymore. I need more cat slime romance. But this would be a story for another time, and let's get back to Rid. On Rid's journey to Renna route, the Christie Company joined them to help secure the supply lines, and after the long ride, he felt sick. He rushed to his bed to rest and called Memory. He asked if he had found anything useful in his previous memories, but Memory couldn't find anything. Instead, he got an image of Prince Racis Renarut. Rid was amazed because a boy appeared before him. He stared at him to remember his face, and it somehow made him think Racis would be a pain in the butt. A knock was heard, and when he opened it, Chris greeted him and apologized for distributing it to him. She handed him some candies infused with herbs to help with motion sickness from their long trip. Rid was amazed and thought she was an angel sent from heaven. He thanked her, and when the next day came, he took one candy before they left for their destination. It was a key location in the main story, but due to the Dark Elves and their culture, it became famous and excited the players. A fusion of Eastern and Western cultures was seen. It looked like Japan after the Meiji Restoration. Rainer told him their culture came from the alliance between Magnolia and Renarut, but Rid got distracted when he saw rice paddies. After learning it was common to this place, Rid became more eager to secure a supply line. Seeing the field of rice made him miss Japanese foods. They finally arrived at the palace. They were escorted to the guest palace, and luckily, the candies Chris gave worked on him. Zach Riverton, the man in charge of the main building, welcomed them. When Rainer said he would be in his care again, Rid raised a brow. He heard Zach was the one who delivered information between Capital and Renicher. Rid was so excited to hop on the hot spring when they were shown the hot spring. After the long day, he was shown his room and lay on his bed to rest, but suddenly he heard a woman's voice. He gasped after seeing Diana in maid clothes. She bowed and told him she would serve as his bodyguard and attendant while they were in Renarut. He nodded and worried about his guarding job due to her maid outfit, but Diana smirked and showed him the hidden weapons wrapped around her thigh. He shrieked in shock to see many more weapons hiding somewhere beneath her clothes, but I hoped she didn't hide something inside her taco purse. He stopped her and asked why he had all these assassin weapons as a knight. Diana paused momentarily and said bodybuild differences between a man and a woman were significant, so she sometimes had to use these in a head-on fight to compensate for their differences. She was still eager to join the knight's order, making him wonder if she was working hard for Rubens's sake. Diana turned red and said maybe he was right because she wanted to work hard for that crybaby. She realizes she was talking too much and takes back what she said. She told him she would stay in the room like thin air, but with her stare, she was too noticeable to ignore. He sighed and eventually drifted to sleep from exhaustion. On the other side, the princess was informed by her bodyguard that the Baldia family had arrived at the guest palace. This bodyguard knew that if the princess were sent to Magnolia, her personal guard would have to go with her. She knew her brother placed her in this situation because he was too jealous of her swordsmanship, and she didn't say anything to them. This woman was Asuna Lamarck, the princess's guard since she was 5. Her instructor constantly nagged her during the first few days of observing the princess. Seeing the princess bow her head and apologize pierced her heart. The instructor told her she should be a model to others and be perfect. Asuna couldn't help but step in and ask if she was being too harsh on the princess, but the instructor glared at her and said it was an order from the king and Eltia. That kind of lesson lasted from morning until night, and she couldn't even think of how the princess bore the awful days long before she became her bodyguard. As they spend time together, she grows on her and wants to protect her. Sometimes, she asks the princess if she has been having it hard, but Farah tells her not to worry because she gets used to it. Farah had been enduring this all alone, and seeing the princess cry made Asuna hug her tightly. In her sleep, she could hear her mother telling her to marry the crown prince of Magnolia and not let the marquis in her heart. She had never had a chance to decide by herself. The people around her had been deciding what to do. When she was sent to Magnolia to get a feel for the country before the marriage, she got lost and met a boy who helped her reunite with Asuna. Speaking of that boy, he was currently staring at a painting. He was amazed by the skillful hand of the painter. A knock was heard, and when Zach noticed he was looking at the painting, he asked if he liked it. Rid replied, saying it was very beautiful, making Diana smirk at him for being a naughty boy. Zach chuckled and said the woman on the painting was Eltia, the king's concubine, and when he heard she was also the mother of Princess Farah, he realized what he commented earlier did sound naughty. He couldn't believe he was captivated by the princess's mother. Zach told him Farah looked very much like her mother, so he was certain the princess would be to his liking. He asked if Zach opposed their marriage, but Zach said it was not his place to say anything. He remembered what his father said about some not agreeing with their marriage, and some being neutral. Zach was obviously in the neutral, so Rid wanted him to be on their side. He said if Princess Farah were this beautiful, he might fall in love at first sight. He put on a doe eyes and asked for his support if that happened. And when Zach smiled and promised to support them, Rid punched in the air. After a few moments, Zach told Rainer he was looking forward to what his son would accomplish, making the father curious. Zach said his son wanted him to support the love between them, and he noticed Rid understood his position in Renarutean politics. Rainer was surprised when Rid made Zach say that he would support them. This man was related to Eltia. The organization he secretly controls serves as Renarut's intelligence network and Rainer's collaborator. He didn't expect someone like him to announce his full support for his son. They went on to discuss what Norris had been up to. That man was currently walking to the prince's room to inform him that their plan was proceeding smoothly. He thanked Races for accepting his idea. When the prince tried to speak about his father, Norris cut him off and said his father was with Eltia, dismissing Riesel, the queen, and his mother. Races and Farah had different mothers. Norris had been whispering things about his father to the prince's ears, neglecting to let the queen be with his concubine. Norris kept planting this idea, and when he saw the queen look sad, hatred grew inside him toward his father. Norris had been on his side, telling him he would always help him to become a wonderful king. He had been molding Races' mind to be his pawn. When he left, he stopped outside and asked how the prince was doing from his perspective. The shadow moved and told him the prince didn't suspect anything and fully trusted him. Norris chuckled devilishly and exclaimed that the Magnolian Hicks should watch him. The following day, Farah slipped on her beautiful dress. It was her first time wearing Western clothing, and Asuna said she looked stunning. Farah thanked her and asked if she thought the marriage candidate would also like it. Asura nodded and assured her that she was more beautiful than usual today, and her fiancé would find her pretty. Farah was nervous and excited at the same time. A knock on the door was heard, and when the person came in, it was Eltia, her mother. She looked at her daughter wearing the dress she sent. Her words were cold and piercing as she told her daughter not to disgrace the Renaroot because if she showed them how perfect she was, it could lead to marriage talks with the royal family. Farah nodded, and when her mother left, she sighed in relief. Asura asked if she was right, so the princess nodded. She said it was business as usual. Her bodyguard told her not to worry because they would surely send a promising guy to her to ease her mind. Farah looked outside the window, wondering what kind of a person Ridbaldia was. Norris went to the king, asking if he could proceed with his proposed plan to test the Marquise's son. The king told him it would be up to him and warned him not to insult them because they were still nobles from the empire. Elias lets do what he wants for now because he thinks Norris only wants to get the princess to marry the crown prince. At least that was what he thought. Rid had been looking at himself in the mirror, so Diana stepped in to make him snap out of it because he acted like a young lady about to meet the prince for the first time. Diana exclaimed that he was naturally cute and that his clothes were just decorations. Rid shyly smiled as he thanked her, but our hype queen wasn't done. She told him if she were a girl, he would have been drowning in marriage proposals. Zach suddenly came in, telling them Rainer was waiting for him. As they walked down the stairs, Zach tells him his friend informed him that the leader of the opposition faction was Norris, and he has a strong influence on the prince. Rid asked about Eltia, but he was told they had different motives, making him think she was neutral. He now knew racist would be his biggest obstacle, so he asked for Zach's opinion on how to have the prince accept him. Zach looked at him and told him to temporarily crush the prince's spirit. Rid gasped because he didn't want to hurt the prince. Zach explained he used to be a wise prince, but his regard for Norris became intense, making his speech and conduct contradictory to his position, and he became more mentally unstable. He wanted Rid to see this as a request from a concerned nobleman to his country. He didn't expect this to become a big deal, but he knew this would be his chance to make a big impact by changing the prince's heart. He tried asking why Racis admired Norris so much, but it was beyond Zach's station to say. When they met his father, Rid was scolded for being late. Zach excused himself and said he would look forward to hearing about his exploits. Rid was confused and wondered what it meant as they traveled. At first, he thought they would be heading to the big castle, but they went to the military fortress. Rainer told the soldiers he wanted to see the king, but they were asked to surrender their weapons before they could enter. Rainer told the other knights to stay there. He and Rubens gave their weapons to them, and the four of them went inside to meet the king. Before entering the Japanese-inspired building, they were asked to take off their footwear. Everyone was waiting through this door as they entered, and when they entered, many people were staring at them. Everyone was silent and giving off uncomfortable stares. As they walked down, gazes of suspicion, curiosity, and doubt landed on them, but they remained firm and ignored their eyes. When they noticed there was only one seat before them, Rainer frowned. Norris apologized for it because they were informed Rainer was the only one granted an audience with the king. They knew it was intentional, so Rainer asked what his son thought. He looked at the elf, and based on his gaze, he knew every elf inside didn't like him. He noticed an eerie aura coming from behind, and he almost shrieked when he saw Rubens and Diana glaring at the elf for being rude. He glared at the two to keep their faces calm. Rainer told him not to raise his head until he was told to. He nodded and bowed before the door. When Rainer made an introduction for his entrance, the door opened, and the king looked at everyone and told them to raise their heads. They now get to see the face of the Renature family, but the princess seems to be surprised when she sees Rid. While everyone was keeping their faces blank, the king greeted Rainer and apologized for the fuss because the elves wanted to see them. He figured this child beside him was his son, so Rid spoke, formally introducing himself as the son of Rainer Baldi, and saying that he came there to give his greeting to them. They were in awe at his grand speech. The king asked how old he was, and they learned he was just the same age as Farah. The princess was told to introduce herself, so she did while smiling softly and looking at Rid's eyes. With their eyes exchanging emotions, Farah couldn't help but flap her ears slightly in happiness. Her mother warned her to stop it, making Rid wonder why her ears moved so much. The rest of the Renaroot introduced themselves to them, and when they all finished, King Elias asked Rid what his opinion was in this situation. Everyone's eyes landed on him, waiting to answer, but Racis scoffed and told the king there was no point in asking a child this young. Norris agreed, but the king let Rid answer it. Rid thought he would deal with Norris and do what he hated the most. He told the king their union had to happen. The elves gasped in surprise at his brave statement. His father looked at him in worry, but when the king told him to continue, Rid said their territories were right next to each other, and if they strengthened their relationship, it would serve as a great deterrence to Balst. The king asked him if he was saying they couldn't trust Magnolia to support them, but Rid said no. He explained that there would still be possibilities Balst would think the Magnolia wouldn't immediately provide support. Still, with their marriage, the Baldia could independently mobilize an army in an emergency. Rid would have a reason to defend her wife and ally country without waiting for the Empire's orders. The nobles seemed to agree with it, so he continued, saying that this would be a greater deterrent than a mere alliance. It isn't something they could obtain through marriage with the Magnolia imperial family either. Racists exclaimed that they are already in an alliance. Even if there were no union, they would still have to make a move. Rid clarified the root of the problem. They must think about how the Balst would see it. Just because they are allied countries doesn't mean that the Baldia house would be able to move their army at a moment's notice. When mobilizing an army, defending one's own country is first and foremost. If Balst were to only attack Renorut's borders, then the Baldia wouldn't be able to mobilize without instructions from the Empire. He asked his father if he was right, so Raynor agreed but told them it was best not to take the child's words seriously. However, it is true that a marriage alliance would be a greater deterrent. In short, Baldia will be useful against Balst. Racis gritted his teeth as Norris looked at them. Rid told them there were a few more reasons, but he would keep it a secret until after the wedding. King Elias burst out laughing and said Raynor's air was frightening because to hear his thoughts like this, he even said if Rid turned out to be their enemy, it would be bad. Norris tried saying it was just words from a child, but Elias said Raynor acknowledged it and told Racis to broaden his horizons. He thanked Rid for his great idea and practical gains, making Norris sulk in shame and whisper to the king. The king suddenly wondered if Rid's words came from someone who excels in both pen and sword, so he requested to see his prowess in martial arts. Rid was shocked after hearing that. And so, with Rid's wedding bells drawing near, Races might just have another trick up her sleeve. Will love or sabotage win? Can they stop the looming war with the Balst Empire? Or will the elven forests burn? And what about Norris? Will his twisted schemes for power crumble under their own weight? The stakes have never been higher, and the drama's just getting started. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to my channel so you're first to know. Team Rid and Farah, drop a comment and let's flood the feed just to mess with Norris. Until then, stay safe, stay hyped, and see you soon.